Hello, my name is Tyler Burry, and I'll be presenting this podcast as my final project for AMST 301, in which I'll be discussing how the gold rush of 1849 shaped California history and its cultural formation. The gold rush is considered to be the most significant event in California history. The state's story can be told through its economic evolution during this era, the experiences of its diverse population, and the culture that was created during this time as it prevails in present-day California. To contextualize the historical event and its effect on California, we must understand the land's history before the gold rush. Before becoming a U.S. territory, the Spanish missions were the only existing regional infrastructure in California. What are now large cities such as LA were hardly populated towns. The native population was roughly 150,000, made up of mostly Californios. As America grew in power and ambition, the country began to expand west, adapting the manifest destiny sentiment. In 1848, the U.S. had won and agreed to terms with Mexico under the Treaty of Guadalupe, in which America gained what is present-day California and several neighboring states. And then on January 24th, 1848, James Marshall, a carpenter from Missouri, discovered the first pieces of gold in California. The news would soon spread, and the state would change the course of California United States history. The ensuing gold rush nearly instantaneously reshaped California from an isolated piece of land to a hub for American industry with tremendous untapped potential. During the first 5 years of the gold rush, nearly 250,000 people migrated to California, and $345 million worth of gold was mined. This influenced the Union states in the North to support the notion of popular sovereignty and push California to be admitted into statehood in 1850, which essentially stemmed from the need to quickly regulate the hundreds of thousands of people rushing to the state. The state quickly became urbanized as cities such as San Francisco became necessary epicenters of trade and ports of transportation. San Francisco also became the center of capital, investment, and business. Over 50,000 people came to the city in the first years of the rush. By 1851, it ranked fourth in the nation for trade. The massive migration inherently spawned the need for essential goods and services and the need for urban-based jobs, which would give rise to a new society. The immense social and economic changes that followed the gold rush were also supplemented by the Industrial Revolution. The two historic movements in combination would remodel California from an agricultural-based society to an industrial society. Although agriculture was no longer the center of the state's economy, the industry grew substantially purely due to the high demand from an increasing population and the advancement of farming technologies. Thousands that came to the state seeking gold ended up finding success as farmers. For instance, European immigrants capitalized off the advantageous climate and their knowledge of viticulture by creating the state's original orchards and vineyards. The wine industry became an outstanding success and is still a hallmark attraction of the state, as it's drawn significant revenues and tourists from across the globe. The gold rush created an immense need for transcontinental railroad. However, political tensions between the North and South regarding the extension of slavery obstructed these plans. Eventually, years after the start of the rush, construction of the railroad was approved, which was in 1862, and then again in 1864. And by 1869, California was finally connected to the east by train. Although the gold rush had peaked years ago, it had a profound influence on the construction and funding of the railroad. 4 leaders of the Central Pacific Railroad Union were men who made their money during the gold rush. Additionally, the majority of the laborers were Chinese immigrants that traveled to California during the rush seeking fortune. Now, overall, the railroad prompted cultural interaction within California, further setting the stage for cosmopolitan society that it grew into. As the railroad provided passage for settlers to travel to and from California, there's a new development in the maritime trade and transportation that demanded expansion across the Pacific. The increase in migration led to large-scale passenger traffic traversing foreign territories and international waters. Maritime transportation incorporated places outside of North America and continent into the domestic travel circuits of the US. It also had a significant lasting influence on the population demographic of the state, as Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, and Chileans also found opportunities to work in the growing maritime industry, in addition, the ability to come to the States as a gold prospector. In the end, the economic changes stemmed from the colossal population increase, which invigorated the need for industry innovation and expansion. These developments thrusted California into position as a powerful new state, an imperial American outpost on the Pacific coast, and a new force in American politics. These characteristics were here to stay. According to Min Young Lee's dissertation, Circuits of an Empire, the California Gold Rush and Making of America's Pacific, the pre-1848 non-Indian population of the state hovered slightly below 20,000. The California State Census of 1852 counted a total population of 255,122, which included 171,841 counted as whites, 2,206 African Americans, 54,803 foreign residents, and 31,266 domesticated Indians, as it was told. This more than doubled California's population in 2 years, illustrates the speed of consequent social change during the early years of the rush. Immigrants from Europe, China, South America, and the Pacific flooded to California. The Chinese were one of the more prominent groups. By the year 1852, the state received an average of 8,000 Chinese immigrants per year. By 1860, they were the single largest foreign-born ethnic group in California and comprised 12 to 23% of population of various mining counties. They constructed communities within mining camps and cities which cultivated culturally rich and entrepreneurial communities that still exist to the day across California. They comprise a large percentage of the present-day population. And my first primary source, which is up on the screen, is a photograph from 1860 taken at Spanish Flat, a mining community in El Dorado County, California. It depicts a white prospector and a black prospector. The photo encapsulates the sentiment that the gold rush brought people of all different ethnic backgrounds to California in search of a common goal. That being said, the man pictured is likely a free African American, but slavery was still legal in the mines during these days, and racism was still very much alive in the state. As had followed in the nation's preceding history, American settlers in the gold rush saw their ethnic immigrant counterparts as distinct underclass. The various groups were subject to extreme racism and xenophobia, and eventually anti-immigration legislature. The Chinese were an easy target group for this movement as they were successful in the mines and business. This competition induced legislatures to implement a foreign miners tax, which whites hoped would reduce competition for the available gold and increase state tax revenues. These motives accentuated the racialization of labor during the gold rush era and exhibited how capitalists exploited immigrants to strengthen the state's economy. In addition to the involvement of immigrants in the gold rush, Native Americans also had a large role. Many of the Plains tribes dealt with devastation wreaked by the gold rush immigrants, and their resources were significantly depleted. Shortages led tribes to relocate and spurred conflict between other tribes over competition for land and food, all in all, reshaping the Native American population in the state. The gold rush inspired immigrants to move to California and search for a better life overall. The reality is they are frequently exploited and met with racism. However, the communities of Chinese immigrants, Mexican immigrants, African Americans, and others that began in the gold rush era are at the foundation of California's cultural landscape. Their development has been crucial to the resistance movements rooted in California, which we have studied in this class. The opportunity that the gold rush presented set in motion the cultural birth of the state, which sent shockwaves across the nation and essentially reinvigorated the American dream. Although many found success in the gold rush, the reality was that life as a prospector was difficult and oftentimes unrewarding. A Canadian man by the name of Augustine Hibbard expresses this truth in a letter addressed to his brother from the year 1850. It reads, "I went the next morning to the Sutter Mill and saw the race in which the gold was first discovered. While there, I heard the race, the gold, and the men who discovered it. Most bitterly cursed by a poor wretch, who said that he'd given up a business at home and supported himself and family comfortably, and sacrificed property to raise enough to support the family while here, and $1,000 to bring out with them. His $1,000 were gone and his health lost." He goes on to describe his own experiences, from severe illness to his struggle making a living in the mines. Overall, his words convey the power that the California dream and gold rush carried. Not all found riches, but despite that, they are willing to pursue the golden opportunity. This belief is echoed in current day, as California is seen as a prize state by many in which people come to make it big or pursue their dreams. By the same token, the ascension of California oil, real estate, and the motion picture industry parallel the golden state that came to be in 1849, have galvanized new generations of gold seekers who hope to find success in the state. The bolstered economy encouraged the growth of the California public education system. This new curriculum would be introduced over the years would vitalize college students to question the traditional teachings of American history, including the one-sided story that was conveyed with the gold rush. This opened the space for academics and researchers to explore the darker perspectives of our nation's history, which would lay the foundation for a push for change in the California history curriculum. Ultimately, the gold rush is woven into California's history and culture. It's represented in the state's seal and referenced in sports teams such as the San Francisco 49ers and the Golden State Warriors. The rise of Silicon Valley and wealth created in California by software companies is even inevitably referred to as a new gold rush. The story of the gold rush and its role in California history contextualizes the state's passage to becoming a cultural and economic nucleus of the nation. My research concludes the gold rush had a profound impact on the economic development of the state and influenced the restructuring of California's immigrant population. Their experiences highlight the state's darker side of history, in which the racialization of immigrant labor and anti-immigration laws fueled the state's economic success. Essentially, the combination of the economic and immigration factors, along with the ideology, the California dream, are largely responsible for current day California's culture, demographic, and economic success. Thank you for listening.